Hey guys, welcome to week 7. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start by sharing my screen with you, so we can dig right into what I'm asking for this week. So the first thing that I've posted is this document that's meant to help you with the analysis paragraphs that you'll eventually write for WP2, right? So hopefully you got a chance to take a look at that sample paper. We're going to talk about it either in this video, or I'll make a separate one mentioning stuff about the sample paper. But the first thing before we get into that, I think it's worth exploring this idea of the kind of logic that your project, your paper has to follow. We're writing an argument, we're persuading the audience of something. And if you're persuading anyone to do anything, right, you're first of all, you're making a claim, right? You're stating, this is my position, this is my stance, this is what I want from you or from society or like whoever, whatever the action is that you're hoping, um, happens as a result of you stating your claim. Um, you have to support that, right? You have to support that claim with reasoning, with evidence. And typically, right, the instinct for the majority of papers that you'll write is to back it up with research. And that instinct is correct. And we are going to do research in this class, just not for this assignment. Now you are doing some base level research, right? You have to like look up this visual text, right? You have to find your visual text in the first place, which is going to take some, just like real foundational surface level um, research. But aside from that, our support that we're coming up with, right, the evidence that we're finding to support our claims for this paper should all be coming from A, the visual text that you're analyzing, and B, your interpretation, right? So from upstairs, you shouldn't have to go and find a bunch of other research. The framework is already there, right? We're providing the framework for you. It's all about your interpretation of these images. And so to go along with that, I've put together this WP2 types of reasoning document that I think will just serve as a good reminder of these things. Okay, so typically when we are asked to conduct this kind of paper, right? To conduct a persuasive essay where we're using some sort of appeal to logos. There are two different types of reasoning that we can draw from. The first one being inductive, right? So inductive reasoning is this. I start with the specific scenarios. I start with the facts. So if you're talking to your coworker and your coworker says, "Hey, my friend stole my bike, and my friend kicked my dog, and then my friend kissed my girlfriend." What's the logical conclusion we can draw from those three things? Well, that friend is a bad person. That friend is a jerk. But you see how we started first with the specific scenarios. We started with the statement of fact, and then from there we drew the conclusion from it. That's inductive reasoning. Deductive would be the opposite. Deductive is starting with the position, starting with the general claim. Hey, my friend is a bad person. And you might ask, well, why is your friend a bad person? Let me tell you why. Stole my bike, kicked my dog, kissed my girlfriend. These three reasons. And so either one of these will work for your project, but I believe that what makes more sense, what works better, and what I oftentimes see students utilizing more is inductive reasoning. And the reason for that is because, as you saw in our first exercise that we did, and what we'll take a look at here in a moment with this other commercial from Xbox, in the Coca-Cola advertisement exercise, we started first with our observations, right? We were kind of just doing like a visual, like an overview of like things that we were noticing, things that we were pointing to. Those are observations that you can't deny, right? We know that there was a Coke bottle that was in the middle of the image. We know that there was kind of like some abstract imagery to the right. We know that there was like meant to be fruits and cheeses. These are things that our audience can all agree upon. We might not ultimately agree with the conclusion that you're drawing from there. We might not necessarily agree with your claim, but that's our impetus. That's our job, right? To provide enough evidence for you to convince you that my claim, my viewpoint, my position is the correct way to interpret this stuff. So, starting first with our observations, like we typically do in a visual analysis, makes sense that we're conducting this process of inductive reasoning rather than deductive. But again, either one is going to work. Either one is going to work. We just always want to remember whether you were using inductive or deductive reasoning. I've kind of like split up the differences over here. So again, inductive, we're starting with our observations. Deductive, we start with a general statement, a general claim. And then from there, we either move to that general claim or that conclusion, or from that general claim, we have to support it with the details, right? The microcosms. But remember, for WP2, we always want to go back to this idea of rhetorical significance. And what is it that I mean by that? What do we mean by rhetorical significance? That's the stereotype. That's what we're exploring over here. We're exploring this notion that there is a mainstream media source that through its texts, through its commercials, through its movies, whatever it is somehow representing a community in this unfair, negative, stereotypical light. And so we'll always want to recall, hey, what's that rhetorical significance? How do these observations relate back to this representation of a community? Because we're never just like listing observations for the sake of doing so, right? We're not just talking about the color of a person's shirt if that has no bearing on this representation. That's what a bad paper is going to do, right? And I see through those, and 9 times out of 10, it feels like they're just listing observations off for the sake of reaching the word count. So be mindful that anytime you bring your audience's attention to a subject, to a topic, to a point of interest in this image that you're looking at, you're doing it for a reason. And my audience can expect that this somehow relates back to this stereotype, to this representation. So let's do another little exercise, right? I've got another text that we can take a look at. So I'm going to play this. It's about 3 minutes long. It's his advertisement, old advertisement from Xbox Live, early years of Xbox, right? Like 2002. So what this was a promotional disc that comes with the purchase of an Xbox, trying to convince you that, hey, you need to also buy the Xbox Live subscription so you can play with your friends online. Now, what this community, right? If we're thinking about a community then that they're representing in the commercial, well, naturally it's gamers, right? It's the gaming community. And off the top of your heads, right, start listing things that you've heard are negative stereotypes about the gaming community. Things like, well, they're unhygienic, right? They live in their parents' basement. They can't hold down a job. Maybe they're out of touch with reality. They're so obsessed with the game. Their game is their only priority, so they shirk all other responsibility in favor of just focusing all of their time and attention on playing the video game. These are some of those negative stereotypes that we could start with if we're exploring a community like the gaming community. Ones that we know that society imposes upon this specific group of people. And then from there, it makes sense. What's the origin of this? Where are we finding this perpetuated in media? Well, let's look internally. Let's look at the very gaming companies, corporations, these brands that the gamers are so attached to see if we can find maybe these attitudes being perpetuated, being communicated to these audiences and about these audiences. And this is a great example of that. So I'm going to let this advertisement run, and then we will start breaking down what's happening here.
Just got into Xbox Live. I have this really great high-speed connection, and I was playing one-on-one NFL Fever against some other players from around the country. Now my gamer tag, my online ID is Dark Master. I was masking my voice. You can use your real voice, or you can pick from a list of voices. I was just being friendly. I mean, I'm not one of those game guys that gets like totally absorbed, you know. Taste it. Let's go. You want some more? Like that, do you? Watch me go. Oh, yeah. Everybody goes down. Yeah. So pretty soon, I had like the highest score in the country. Master. Actually, I think there was one other person that was above me. I mean, hey, it was no big deal. I don't think so. So I decided to be fun to contact this guy and challenge him. All right, how about it, Crusher? I'm Crusher. We'll see who gets crushed, Crusher. He kick away. Hey. Never before. I think I lost the football game. How about a different game, homeboy? Huh, anyway, one of us suggested playing a different game. Think you can cap my flag? Bring it on, Dark Spencer. I thought a team game might be fun, and that some friends that I met online might want to play. You see, Xbox Live has this Optimatch feature, lets you easily find players all over the country who like the same games and levels. I got some boys here who'll make you wish you were never born. I've got Arctic Avenger. Dark Master is in trouble. Buffalo Soldier. Oh, Dark Mastermind. .com. Dark Master. And Sleeping Giant. What? What's that? All right. Impale. Oh, come on. Let's go. All right, Buffalo Soldier. Cover me. Look out. Oh, no. Get back. We're getting killed. Day for Dark Master. We just barely lost. I think I just got tired, and I had an exam the next day I was busy thinking about. It was all right, though. It wasn't like I was all distraught or anything about losing, you know? I mean, it would have been nice to have won, but hey, you win some, you lose some, right?
Well, I don't know much about all that, but as long as you can fit into that chicken suit, the job is yours.
All right, great. So, that's that's our source, right? Our source of material that we're working with, and then the question that becomes, what are our visual texts? It was easy with the first exercise with Coca-Cola because they were print advertisements, right? They were already still images, freeze frames. We can still analyze a commercial, we can still analyze movies, but the thing is, we still need to find screenshots. We need to find still images that we're going to analyze. We can't analyze the entire thing, right? Because if we try to do that, it's either going to come across as plot summary or like a literary analysis, a film as literature analysis, which this is not supposed to be. Again, we are rhetorical terms, rhetorical choices. That's our concern. And we're also not going to analyze every single frame of a commercial or a movie. That would take a very long time, right? That'd be a very long paper. We're just writing 1,200 words over here. So to make sure that those 1,200 words are used in a way that is efficient, we're not wasting anything that we're saying, and we want to be as thorough as possible. We are limiting ourselves to 3 images, 3 stills from this. So then ask yourself, what, based off of the commercial we just saw, what's like a good first image from that commercial that's worthy of analysis and something where we feel like it's perpetuating this attitude that gamers are any one of those stereotypes: unhygienic, unemployed, out of touch with reality. 9 times out of 10, students go to this image. Some shot of him in his room, which of course makes the most sense. So again, according to our inductive reasoning process, the first thing that we'll want to do is start pointing out our observations and not just doing it arbitrarily, not just saying, well, I'm just going to start listing stuff just for the sake of doing it. His shirt's blue, there's a lava lamp. No, we want to focus specifically on things that we're able to then later come back to and say, these things are contributing to this specific stereotype. Unhygienic, unemployed, irresponsible. Where are we seeing that? Well, it makes sense. The first place we start is the messiness of the room. Okay? Yes, we can say that the room is messy, but it's not enough to just leave it right there. What are we noticing is messy specifically? Maybe with the clothing. Okay, there's clothing that is thrown about everywhere, right? There's clothing here at the foot of the table. There's clothing on the bed. There's clothing hanging on the chair right here. There's clothing hanging on the lampshade. There's clothing thrown across the dresser. There's clothing over here. He's kicking clothing around in the scene where he's like moving around playing the video game. There's clothing thrown about all over the place, right? So that's one thing that we can point to and say, this room is messy. It might seem obvious, right? It might seem like we just go straight to that conclusion and our audience will know exactly what we're talking about. If we have a logical audience that we're working with, you are not wrong. But again, the evidence is in the hyperanalysis, the little microcosms. What's another thing? How about food? Food, we see an empty chip bag right here. We see a pizza box with pizza here and pizza there. There's another food item that's sitting atop it that has like some green in there. There's an empty big gulp like Taco Bell cup. More food over here on top of the computer monitor. Again, green. Is that lettuce? Is that guacamole? Or is it mold? We have the poster over here. The poster is like fallen off the wall. It looks like it was like ripped off the wall or something. Maybe he's raging. Maybe he's getting angry, throwing the controller about, ripping stuff down from the walls. These are observations that are all contributing to this stereotype. These are things that I can use to not only make the conclusion, the conclusion that because there's clothing and food items thrown about the room, that the room is messy, but it relates back to ultimately what would be my thesis statement. What my thesis statement would be suggesting, that Xbox Live is somehow perpetuating these unhygienic, out of touch with reality, unemployed, basement dweller gamer scenarios, gamer stereotypes. And so that's what the rest of this document takes a look at, right? That same process that we just discussed, right? We start with our observations of a visual text if we're using inductive reasoning. So the example being, there's perceivably old moldy food items. There are perceivably old moldy food items. There's wrinkled, dirty laundry thrown about the room, on the floor, on the bed, hanging on the lampshade. Items that are generally misplaced, like the poster that looks like it fell off the wall, and the half-eaten meal sitting atop the computer monitor. We can dissect that even further, but for the sake of just streamlining this conversation, that's what's going on within this room in a nutshell. Those are our observations. No one is going to second guess that. There's no debate about those things. Those are cold hard facts. Any logical person would agree with that. And so from there, we need to draw a conclusion. Therefore, the gamer's room is messy and disorganized. Yes, absolutely true. But we don't stop there. And we also don't just jump straight to the gamer's room is messy and disorganized, which means that Xbox is perpetuating this attitude that gamers are messy and disorganized. It's not enough. It's not enough to do that. And in early drafts of papers, when students are like struggling to reach the word count, it's because they're doing that. They're jumping straight to the conclusion and they're not giving me all of like the little details in the observations. And then they're also not getting creative with this next part, answering that question about rhetorical significance, answering the so what. So what if the gamer's room is messy and disorganized? So what if you're pointing out all of these sort of misplaced and dirty items that are thrown about the room? So what? How are these rhetorical choices? Why is it that the authors, the creators of this commercial, decided to portray the gamer in this way instead of a nice, neat room, hanging out, got his life together? Why is it that we're portraying him in this way? That's the rhetorical significance conversation, and that's where the majority of your analysis papers, paragraphs, should be focused on. So something like this: the gamer's room is a reflection of the perceived state of mind and body of the gaming community. He is dirty like the clothes thrown about the room and the stained, worn clothing on his body. He is fueled by unhealthy junk food, like the cold pizza and Mountain Dew on the computer desk, implying a carelessness about what he consumes and echoed by the attention paid to playing the game. While the room is in a state of disarray, the video game has his full attention, hunching over, feverishly clicking away at the controller, almost ready to pounce in the direction of the television. I could have stopped there. I could have stopped at while the room is in a state of disarray, the video game has his full attention as he's hunching over. We could have stopped right there, right? Again, those are cold hard facts. But I want you to get creative with your claims. So think about like what is it that it looks like he's about to do? If all we have to work with is this image, this freeze frame, this still, if that's the only commonality between you and your audience, what does it appear to you? What do you want to suggest to your audience that it looks like he's about to do? What is his facial expression communicating? What's on his mind? What is he thinking about? What does he care about? And so we take it further. Not only is he hunched over, but his thumbs are feverishly clicking at the controller. He's almost ready to pounce in the direction of the television. The game dictates his existence. He does not care about the room, his physical appearance, or hygienic responsibilities. His priority is simply the video game, which tells the audience that gamers cannot be trusted to care for themselves because they are too engrossed with gaming. That's how your analysis paragraphs should read for this assignment. That's inductive reasoning. And take note that that's how the sample paper approached their work. And before we pivot to that, it's worth reminding us what needs to be included in a thesis statement for this assignment. Thesis statement, once again, it needs three things. We think of thesis statements in this way where it's like, well, it should be the last sentence of my introduction, right? It's going to be the preview of my paper. It's the roadmap. Everything that I'm talking about in the analysis paragraphs, I'm kind of providing that firstly in the introduction, in this thesis statement, in this single sentence. How is it that we can be concise, but yet thorough? How is it that we could take my entire argument and condense it into this one sentence? How is it that I can make sure that I'm making a claim in there rather than just like stating observations or stating facts that all the audiences that read my paper would agree with? To make a claim is to pose something that people can debate. People aren't going to debate the messiness of this room. They're not going to debate these observations, but they could debate my interpretation of these things. They could say, Austin, you're doing too much. I disagree with you. This is not what is being perpetuated. This is not a stereotype that's being shown over here for these reasons, X, Y, and Z. So our thesis statement, in order to do all of those things and satisfy the requirements of this assignment, we need to include these three things. First, we have to name the mainstream source of the visual texts. In this case, it was Xbox. The previous exercise, it was Coca-Cola. Okay? Are these mainstream sources? Absolutely. This is Xbox, right? We're not talking about like some other smaller brand. We're not talking about, Soldier Boy's video game company that he claimed to have made and sold to Nintendo for like $1 million. I've never seen it. I've never seen the receipts. We're not talking about, some random iced tea drink that you buy at Whole Foods. We're talking about Coca-Cola, the heavy hitters, the mainstream sources, the ones that have influence over our culture and dictate in a lot of ways what the attitudes might be, these cultural perceptions about a given community. So the first thing we have to do is we got to name that mainstream source. We have to mention Xbox in our thesis statement. Number two, we have to name the visual features, the two visual features of analysis. So what are visual features? Well, we talked about his clothing. We talked about his posture. We could talk about his facial expressions. We could talk about production elements like the design of the room, the props that are in the room, the camera angle, the lighting. All of these things are considered visual features. What isn't a visual feature is dialogue, because I can't see dialogue, right? I can't see what he's saying. I can't see what he's telling the Chicken Shack manager in this image right here. Therefore, I can't use that as a feature of analysis for this project that is inherently visual. It's a visual analysis. And what we're going to do is we're going to collect a bank of visual features that we're going to use. Hint, hint, take notice that the sample paper, it uses body language and production design. When we talk about that, I will talk about why those are the ones that I recommend we use for the most part, right? Because they're all encompassing. But we need to mention our two visual features of analysis in that thesis statement. And then finally, we have to define the relationship between the visual texts, the author of the visual text, right? And that's this mainstream source, and the stereotyped discourse community. So, the example, using this Xbox one, it would read something like this. The 2002 Xbox Live advertisement uses pick two visual features of analysis, but you will be beholden to using those same two visual features of analysis through the rest of your paragraphs, right? Through the rest of your essay. You can't choose, well, for the first one, I'm going to talk about clothing and color, and then I'm going to talk about facial expressions and accessories. It has to be the same two each time. And I'm going to give you a little cheat code so that you choose ones that are still accurate in your thesis statement, that you are beholden to these things, but they're general enough that you can expand your analysis when we're reading the paragraphs, and you can talk about all these other things. Hint, hint, body language. But the Xbox Live advertisement uses, we'll say, clothing and posture. To do what? So we've done the first two things. We've named the text, and we've named the two visual features. Now, the last thing we have to do is we have to define this relationship between the visual text author and the stereotype discourse community. So what is it doing? Well, it's perpetuating the stereotype that gamers are what? What did we say at the beginning of this exercise? We said that gamers are a bunch of different things. We said that they're unhygienic, unemployed, out of touch, basement dwellers. Because that's what's communicated in this advertisement. We can find, using this one as our first visual text and then two others that are communicating that same stereotype, but we can find proof, still images, and then within those still images, find supporting concrete evidence through our observations that indicate to our audience, here's what's going on. Xbox is using this stereotype to sell the games. But in doing so, they're representing a community and feeding into, informing our cultural perception of that community. And so we want to be as detailed as possible when we're saying this. It's not enough to just say they're perpetuating the stereotype that gamers are dirty or gamers are messy. That's a starting point, but I want us to go deeper. Give us more. Be as detailed as possible in this description. And that's your thesis statement. That's the writing of a proper thesis statement. Okay? So I'm going to wait to talk about the paper in another video, right? But I do want to let us know what to do for the rest of the week over here. So going back to Blackboard, consult this document, refer to this after watching this video, right? It's just going to help you with your process. Next week, we're going to talk about this article, this visual design elements and principles article. So for this week, I just want you to read it. What it is, it's 14 different design elements and principles, everything from line and shape and color to dominance, repetition, harmony. And it's looking at it through the lens of a graphic designer. So we're just getting like baseline definitions of these things, but we're going to take these things and in next week's video lecture, we're going to look at a bunch of different movie stills that I feel like exemplify one of these elements. Now, they all, and this goes for every visual text, they all have multiple ones working together, right? This isn't just like a one-off thing. Well, this one really uses line. If it's only using line, it would just be a picture of a line, right? All of these things work in tandem with each other. But our purpose in doing this is like not only to familiarize ourselves with this sort of like technical language that we can use in our analysis of a visual text, but it's to expand our understanding of these things. So when we're looking back at our visual features, right, and talking about something like clothing, well, then how does like texture play a role in the clothing? How does the color of the clothing play a role, right? What's the sort of like societal rhetorical significance of these things? And if that's relevant, then that's stuff that's going to help you to expand your analysis. So for this week, take a look at this article, okay? This article is one that, one that I'm going to ask you to read in preparation for next week's activities. We have a discussion board this week. The discussion board is focused on this. You're going to do a Google image search for toys for boys and then toys for girls, right? And I'm going to ask you to write down some observations in this discussion board. Some talking points are things like, what are the differences? You're going to compare and contrast these, toys for boys and toys for girls. Compare and contrast the use of color. How it feels like toys, it seems like toys are designed. How are they built? What are they built for? Are they more durable? Are they less durable? Are they more expensive? Are they cheaper? This is an important one. Think about the sort of like professions and the societal roles that you feel like are being communicated through these toys. Think about characters, famous characters. On the girl side, we have Barbie. On the boy side, we have superheroes. We have G.I. Joe, action figures. What is that communicating about boyhood and girlhood? What is that communicating about masculine roles versus feminine roles? Think about accessories and tools. Think about this idea of creativity. Notions of creativity is a very interesting one. So when we have a toy that's wanting a boy to express their creativity versus a toy that wants a girl to express her creativity, what does that look like? And this last one, how are children expected to play with the toys? Are they expected to play aggressively with it? Are they expected to be more gentle? Are they expected to be responsible? Are they expected to destroy it? Whatever it is, how are they expected to play with the toys based off of these things, these observations? Okay, so write down as much as you can, because again, this is also going to feed into a little exercise that we will do next week, right, in the next video lecture. So I'm asking this to be due Saturday night so that I can take a look at it Sunday and prep the video lecture for the week. But yeah, what are toy makers suggesting about the nature of girls versus the nature of boys through the toys that they're expected to play with? All right, so just write your responses in the text box, give it a subject title, and submit that this week. And then finally, the last thing I'm going to ask us to do, and this is for Friday night, I'm going to ask you to post your idea for writing project 2, right? So what is the mainstream industry that you're examining, and what is the stereotype that you feel like they're perpetuating? So who's that community? Next thing, what are your 3 visual texts? Do your best to actually provide the images, okay? So either upload the images or you can upload a Word document for this, but do your best to give me some idea as to what the images are that you're using. Because if they're different, or if I have different ideas about them, if I have suggestions, things that I would change, I want to figure that out now before next week. Next week, I'm going to ask us to put together a draft, okay? So anticipate having to have a rough draft ready by sometime later in the week next week. Because the week after, I want to review drafts and give feedback and offer people the chance to communicate with me digitally, do a digital conference like that, or just receive written feedback on Blackboard. But anticipate that next week you will be asked to write a draft, a rough draft for writing project 2, as we kind of go through this conference phase that we're still defining what that's going to look like for the online group. But and don't forget to include your 2 visual features, right? So we're working on that bank of visual features, but it's things like body language, clothing, color, accessories, facial expressions, posture, and then production elements like props, lighting, camera angles, the way that an object is arranged in an image, right? Think back to the Coca-Cola advertisement. That Coke bottle was center stage. The rest of the stuff was playing a supporting role and sometimes an abstract role. And then there was text, right? There was copy, there was sloganeering happening. So that's the other thing I'm asking us to do. So read the visual design article, do this discussion board, post your writing project 2 idea in this journal. This is a private journal. I'm going to make a second video where we go through the WP2 sample paper together, just to, again, hammer out some of these ideas, right? You're going to be sick of hearing these things that I'm telling you, but it's worth us going through this process, right? Because I think you're recognizing now that there's kind of a lot of different things that I'm asking from you for the second writing project. So it's good to just give us as many resources as possible to make this happen. So at any rate, I'll see you in the next video, but email me if you guys have any questions. I am here to help. All right, have a good week.